The Flames finish just 2 points out of the playoff picture, and success has never felt further away.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and I could not be more excited to be here and talk about Game 82 and the end of the season with you. And if you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. This is Locked On Flames, and you can find Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, and we are available on YouTube for free $9.99 as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. Today we are going to talk about just the ick of finishing the season and being 2 points out of a playoff spot, and how you had multiple opportunities to not be 2 points out of a playoff spot, and you could never pick yourself up. And then, of course, we're going to talk about Darryl Sutter's extension, and apparently the figure that came along with that, as well as Matthew Coronato and Dustin Wolf's NHL debut against the Sharks. But before we do that, I'm just here to remind you that we're here for you, your team every day. In the Calgary Flames offseason, there is so much to dissect that it's not going to be a quick 2-week thing and done. It's going to probably be a while, because this team just went through so much turmoil in the last offseason, and you expected more from this roster, and that's okay. And so make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to be here for you every day. So let's start off on a good note, though. Let's kick it off with the debuts and Nikita Zadorov's hat trick. But Dustin Wolf and Matthew Coronato both made their NHL debut against the San Jose Sharks in a 3-1 win. Both had good games. You know, I think it's pretty good that Dustin Wolf went out there and allowed 1 goal on 24 shots. So, 23 saves is pretty good, right? It was great to see the Flames limit the Sharks to just 1 goal, and obviously limiting those shots. But Matthew Coronato had 4 shots on goal. Both sets of parents were in the stand for the rookies, and it doesn't take the sting away from how awful and painful this season was, but it does kind of make you feel a little bit better about knowing what's ahead. I thought putting Coronato and Pelletier on a line centered by Kadri was a good call. I think that shows a little bit of flexibility in Darryl Sutter. I don't think that he would have put them. I do not think that he would have put them on there had he not wanted to. If he felt like his hand was forced, he probably would have just stuck them on the 4th line and moved Lucic and Lewis up. Like, there's no it was something to look forward to, okay, right? But you can't run this back until obviously this coming October. That is a ways away. We are in April. That is 7 months away. So while there are still some, very big, heavy, looming questions surrounding the Flames this offseason, you can also look on the bright side and say, hey, these guys have gotten their taste of the NHL, and we've seen them perform at the NHL level. We didn't always get to see that. It took a long time for, Matthew Phillips to even get like 2 games in, right? So it's not the end of the world. At least I don't think that the Flames are not in the playoffs. The Calgary Wranglers are, and I would assume they're going to make a deep run because of guys like Dustin Wolf and Matthew Phillips and Jacob Pelletier and Jeremy Poirier. There is a lot to look forward to, and it feels very bleh right now. That's really how I would just describe it. I feel like it just feels kind of gross, like when you wake up, if you've ever woken up with a hangover and you're just like, all of my bad decisions have come back and bit me in the butt at this very moment. I think a lot of us have been there, and I feel like that's kind of where this season ended, is like, all right, like you hit the brakes and you wake up, you're like, oh my God, that is what I did. And the expectations were high for this team, and it didn't work out, didn't turn out that way, but you do still have the Flames next year. And I think that it's just something to look forward to, okay? Like, be excited about it. Be excited about they're finally playing younger guys. And I would expect Matthew Coronato to go back to Harvard. I don't see him making the jump to the league. I think that he probably wants to wrap up. He'll be a junior, at least his junior year at Harvard. So that'll be interesting. But, you do have Dustin Wolf just playing out of his mind with the Wranglers. And you get to watch a deep playoff run from them. And you get to look at Pelletier and Phillips and watch them continue their development, because it's not over. Just because you make your NHL debut, it doesn't mean all development stops, right? You got to keep pushing forward. And coming up next, we are going to talk about the Flames finishing just 2 points out of a playoff spot. But before we do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is a delicious tasting protein bar that everyone needs in their life. They come in a variety of flavors, and they are covered in 100% real chocolate. And now they aren't exclusive to online anymore. You can find them in Sam's Club and Walmart in the pharmacy section, and you can still get your specialty flavors at built.com. And you can head to your nearest Walmart today and walk to the pharmacy section and grab a box of Built Bars. And they have a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or a coconut puff. And Sam's Club has your 13-bar box with hit flavors such as brownie batter puff and churro puff. And you can absolutely thank me later. You are getting a high-protein, low-calorie, low-sugar snack, and it tastes just like a candy bar. So try it out and let me know how you like it. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me on today's episode of Locked On Flames. You can follow me on Twitter at JessBelmosto. Throughout the season, we talked about this team needing to kind of overcome and pulling up their big boy pants and saying, we have to get it together. They never did. They never did. It took a very long time for them to even complete a come from behind win. That isn't something that should take, 79? No, it was like 72 games, I think, like 73, 74, somewhere around there, games to complete, because it just is not, that's not how you win. This team finally learned about their resiliency and their level of just what they had in them, how big the dog in them was, and it was way too late when it happened. 31 goal game losses with 17 overtime losses does not sit well with anyone, and it shouldn't sit well. You can sit here and say, well, they just didn't have the offense, they didn't have the finishes, but in other ways, they found a way. And I think it's just so unbelievable to think that they did not have a come from behind win until last week against Vancouver. That's how long it took. The season is now over. It is game, 82 was yesterday. Exit interviews are tomorrow. What happened? What happened for there to be such a big disconnect? There was such a big disconnect in this team from, last year to this year. And I don't necessarily think it's because of players changing and roster turnover, because, most teams kind of start to click after a little bit. And this team never really did. And, they all hung out outside of practice and camp and things like that in games, because they would host Christmas, they would host birthday parties, they would do bowling nights. Like, this team was a close-knit team, but it didn't translate to the ice, in which we talked about yesterday, comes down to their level of preparation. Why could they go out there and beat good teams, but they couldn't find a way to beat Chicago, Anaheim, the Sharks? You know, it took them too long to figure out who they were. I mean, they still don't really know who they are, but as a team, I think, like, they just are lacking any sort of identity, and other than a group of veterans and some unlucky prospects, really. But 2 points. Come on. You had 31 goal games that you couldn't have figured out. You had 17 overtime losses. 17. You turn 3 of those into wins, whether it be regulation or not. You are going to the playoffs, and we would not be having this conversation. This offseason, you know, there's going to be a shift in things. I would really hate to believe that things are just going to stay the same within the Flames organization, because there is not much of a reason why it should stay the same. You know, a lot of times players, or teams rather, after they don't meet expectations, they're switching up the personnel. They are absolutely doing something to kind of rejuvenate, give their team a facelift, essentially. And I don't think that the personnel will be the same. I know that coming up next, we're going to talk more about Darryl Sutter's contract, but it is so confusing to me how this team did this. How this team was able to give us nothing. They gave us absolutely nothing. You know, you can look back at the season and say, you know, like they were in a playoff spot at this point in time, but they aren't. They aren't now. They are packing their houses, gathering their stuff. They have exit interviews tomorrow and are probably on their way back to Sweden Monday morning at the latest, or wherever they live. I feel like half the team is from Sweden. They spend their summer in Sweden, right? But with the exit interviews being tomorrow, who's going to come up and say, like, we sucked? We absolutely sucked. We did everything we could, but there weren't many opportunities for us to get better, to have better practices, or to have better special teams work, because I don't see any of the players doing that. Could Lucic? I mean, maybe, since he's not coming back, but I think that he is a Sutter guy through and through. It's not. It's not going to happen. I don't see a world in which a player or multiple players are like, yeah, this was a really bad season for us. You know, this could have gone better, but we did everything we could, but it didn't feel reciprocated from behind the bench. And you could tell there was the start of a disconnect, I think, when Sutter just refused to play Matthew Phillips and Jacob Pelletier when they were both called up for like 11 games, and neither of them were seeing any ice time at that point. And Sutter was like, yeah, you know, you just have to kind of like hang out with the big club before you just get like tossed into it. Which, I mean, is true, but then you have Tree Living saying like, no, I've been pushing for this. And, you know, again, that's something we talked about yesterday. There has to be a clear differential between general manager and coach, but they have to be philosophically aligned. Otherwise, you're going to get what you got with the Flames this year. The 2 points hurts, and it does not change the fact that that the Flames flamed themselves, but it definitely, it just, you know, there were so many games left on the table there 31 goal games, 17 overtime losses. There were a lot of opportunities for the Calgary Flames, and the exit interviews are pretty much going to be the same thing as they were last year. Not even last year, because last year they made the playoffs, but the year before that, so the 56-game season, and then the bubble season, or I guess the bubble playoffs. And then the year before that was the year that they played Colorado or was it the Avalanche? I can't remember if it was the Avalanche or Arizona. I don't think it was Arizona, but it's just the tumultuous ride that the Flames fans have been on for the last, really, probably their entire lives, is frustrating, and I can see why people are upset. I absolutely understand, and I sympathize with you. And coming up next, going to talk a little bit more about Eric Francis reporting on Darryl Sutter's supposed contract and the figures surrounding the contract. But before we do that, let's talk about money with Gametime. Have you ever been looking for last-minute tickets and you're just like scouring every possible way to get tickets? Well, I have news for you, because the Gametime app offers you the best prices, and they are competing with other buyers for popular events, and they just make the hunting a lot less work. You can browse through the Gametime app and talk about upcoming events in your area, which, I mean, like, for me, I think right now the Flames, the Bruins are going to be hitting the ice soon for the playoffs, and I might just treat myself to a nice little trip and go see the Bruins play, right? And you too can get your last-minute tickets and on the Gametime app today, and download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account on the Gametime app and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me here today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at JessBelmosto. This morning, listen, I woke up and I was like, the season's over. The season's over. It stinks. There's no playoffs, but the never-ending season, the dread I felt every time I would turn on the television to watch a Flames game, I don't have to deal with that anymore. I don't have to deal with it this season. And the dread of seeing Eric Francis on my television set for intermission reports is no more either, but he is on my Twitter timeline. This morning, I woke up, walking from my car into my office, and I see that Eric Francis tweeted out basically saying that Sutter has like $8 million on the table with this deal in his remaining 2 years, and there's just no way he would walk away from it, which, I mean, I think is fair. $8 million is a good portion of money. No one in their right mind is walking away from that. No one in their right mind is ever walking away from that kind of money. And I don't blame Sutter for not doing that. I don't, because I think that it is very absolutely possible that they kind of maybe shift his role a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I can't think of a coach off the top of my head right now that came in and shifted roles eventually within the same organization. I know it's happened from organization to organization, but could Darryl Sutter just kind of say, hey, I want to just take it easy. I'm getting older. It takes a giant toll on my body to travel. I don't think that Darryl Sutter is going to go into, this summer and go hang out with like the owners and like do rich people things and be like, hey, I want a new job with the organization. I don't think he's going to show up to the I'll have to say 4th of July barbecue, but they don't have 4th of July barbecues up in Canada. Are they going to have like a summer cookout, and Darryl Sutter is not going to show up with like his cooler of Bud Light, his slabs of steak that he promised from, the fresh farm. Does he have like slaughtered cows? I don't know. Anyways, regardless, and place that and say, hey, hi, like, thanks for hosting us. Oh, by the way, like, I quit. I am resigning. No, that's not happening either. I think that Darryl Sutter is absolutely going to talk to his family. I think that traveling for 40-something games a year is exhausting. That it is brutal. I mean, granted, I don't know. I'm not a professional athlete, and I don't pretend to play one on this podcast, but I feel like it has to be tiring to be an older coach and who's, who played through a lot and who's coached and traveled for a long time. Like, don't you want to rest? Aren't you tired? And I get it. Like, no one in hockey is ever going to admit that, like, it took a toll on them, because that's just considered quote unquote weak. But I think that it's something that him and his wife are probably going to talk about. Does he want to be at home more? Does he really just kind of want to stay in Calgary and, shift back into an advising role? Because he did what he could with this lineup. And there's no way the Flames can say, yes, things will be so much different next year with the same coach and the same roster, because that's just not how it works. You can't do the same thing time and time again and then expect it to work, because that is just insanity. And I hope that someday we read about this in someone's book. Maybe it'll be Huberdeau's book, about the day he found out he was being traded to Calgary and his first year as a Flame. Darryl Sutter's not walking away from $8 million. I don't know if they can. I'm sure they can. This is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, right? Like the NHL. I'm sure that it is possible for them to be like, okay, like, you're not coaching anymore. Why don't we shift you into this role and just bring up Mitch Love or hire Andrew Burnett? You have to think of different ways to get players going, and it's not going to be the guy that said your star player was taking a crap on the toilet and that's why he missed a shift. Or it's not going to be the guy saying it's not going to be the guy that put Nick Ritchie out there in that shootout. It is not going to be Nick Ritchie. So I don't think Darryl Sutter is the guy anymore. He can stay with the organization as long as he wants. I don't care, as long as it's just not behind the bench coaching this team that I have to talk about every single day. And thank you, everyone, so much for hanging out with me here on Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Remember to make sure those notifications are on, and of course, you're tuning in every day when you can. We have a lot of great off-season content planned, because it's going to be a massive dissection of an 82-game season, because that's what it needs. It needs just that. And I will see you tomorrow, and I will be back with Nick to talk more about the painful ending to this season.